Hi everybody, I'm Chris and welcome to Board on the Floor. Today I thought I was going to do a quick video on all of the games that I added to my collection in August, and then I realized as I started pulling them off the shelf that I bought a heck of a lot of games this month. And so as much as I'd want it to be a quick video, this might take a bit of time. But let's get right into it so that it doesn't take too much time. The first game I'm going to talk about is Anachrony. This is a game designed by David Turksey and put out by Mindclash Games. I bought this one used, and it's the retail version. It's also known as the Essential Edition. And it just comes with the basic 2 to 5 player game and components. And so if you want the solo mode, you have to actually buy an expansion called Fractures of Time. This also came with Fractures of Time. I just didn't put it out on the table because Fractures of Time and then the collection of minis, it's 2 other boxes, thought it would be too much. But Anachrony is kind of a sci-fi, time travel, it's not really area control, I guess, worker placement, resource building kind of game. Really not complicated, but a lot of components and some complex rules and mechanics and interactions between all of the different boards, your characters, the bot, which is known as the Chronobot. And at first when I played it, I found it really engaging. And then after losing for 5 games straight, I got very frustrated with it, and I actually packed it up and listed it for sale. And then I slept on it, and I woke up the next day and I realized it wasn't that I disliked the game, it's that I've just felt like I really couldn't understand how to strategize in a way that would allow me to beat the AI opponent. But then I read online that the Chronobot was kind of seen as the harder of the 2 AIs that come within the solo rules. One is called the Chronobot, one is called the Chronosis. And so I thought I'd give it another chance. And so it's still going to be in my collection for a while now. I think it's actually going to stick around because the more I talked about it with other people and the more I thought about it, I realized that I really, really liked it. And so that is Anachrony. I also bought a lot of kind of small box games in August. So I think I could quickly go through some of those. Here we have Death Angel. Not much to say about this one. This is an old game. This is probably about 10 or 15 years old. This is a classic game that I read a lot about, and when I saw someone selling it for real cheap just around the corner from where I lived, I felt very lucky and I grabbed it as quick as I could. Because it's a lot of people talk about it when it comes to playing it solo. And it's very, very simple to set up. You just have a row of your Space Marines, and then Gene Stealers come out of different areas, and you have to fight or defend yourself. It's a fun little game, quick to set up, and it requires a lot of concentration on how you're going to play it out because it's easy to lose. It's actually quite challenging, but that's Base Hulk, Death Angel, the card game. Here we have Unbroken. And Unbroken was a Kickstarter game from a couple years ago. There was a lot of controversy surrounding it when it came time to fulfilling the game. I didn't read too much about it, but I think it had a lot to do with how the publisher interacted with a lot of the complaints or the delays that some of the people who had supported the Kickstarter had expressed in the comments. And so as much as the game kind of got a bad rap, people talked about how the actual creator of the game was very vocal online and responded as much as possible to the complaints and tried to do his best to support the people who had pledged. But because of it, I think a lot of people were selling it. So there's quite a few used copies going around. I got my hands on it. This is also a 1-player game, so it's purely solo. This is a really interesting concept too. It's kind of like, I guess, a post-apocalyptic world, though it's more of a dark future, and you're caught underground during an expedition, and your team has been slaughtered, and you've also been injured, and you have to try and survive a certain number of rounds and fight a certain number of bad guys in order to escape. Cool artwork, I think a very interesting concept, and a lot of story elements in this for something so small. And I like that you spend your round kind of like in preparation. You prepare, so you strengthen your character, and then you go out and you kind of like challenge the monsters. And there's 4 rounds. You play through 4 rounds. Each round you get more action, so you can spend more time preparing because you're going to be fighting harder and harder monsters as you go through the 4 rounds of the game. And that is Unbroken. Crystallo is a very basic card game. I guess it's known as a puzzle card game. But what you're pretty much doing is trying to rescue 6 creatures from this evil dragon. And after you rescue them, you're able to use the crystals that had kept them trapped to attack the dragon and try and defeat him. You set it up with the 6 cards for the creatures that have been trapped by the dragon. And then you get a deck of cards and you start taking them out. They have different symbols on them. And as you start to match either 3 of a kind, 3 different, 3 of the same color, stuff like that. Once you match the 3 things, you get to take an orb off of one of the creatures that's been captured. And that's how you kind of free them. So you keep taking off the orbs as you make matches. And then once you've removed all of the orbs, that part of the game ends, and now you actually have to fight the dragon. And with the orbs you have and a few cards that you've put aside, now you kind of get to do the same thing and try and attack the dragon and see if you could actually trap it. Very straightforward, very basic, and a very quick game. It usually lasts about a half hour. I want to see if I could add some pure solo games to my collection and start to see how they differ from these other multiplayer games. Because a lot of these multiplayer games actually have like solo variants, but these games are designed only for one player. And I find that kind of interesting because most of the time I play alone. So in August, I've been adding a lot of these one player games to my collection. And that there is Crystallo, Black Sonata. This is another Kickstarter game, another one-player game. Very straightforward in its rule set, and it's complicated only in the sense that what you're trying to do is kind of like solve the mystery of who the Dark Lady is from Shakespearean sonnets. So if you know any Shakespeare, which I don't, then I guess you might know that the Dark Lady is a character that appeared in one of his sonnets. But all I know about it is what's in the game. And so you travel around London collecting clues. And as you get these clues, they're like cards that have holes in different areas. And when you put them up against the card of the location you're on, if you see the silhouette of the Dark Lady, well, then you could get a clue as to who she might be. And it's actually, there's a lot of variation in the game, which is cool. So it's not like if you play it once, you figure out who she is and you can't really play it again. There's a few different Dark Ladies. And then there's even an expansion that came with it, though I haven't had a chance to break into the expansion just yet. But there's a lot of game in this little box. And I found it very interesting in the way that you move around, collect the clues, and try to figure out exactly who the Dark Lady is. That's Black Sonata. Now, one more one-player game, Warp's Edge. Very simple to set up, but there's a lot of complexity in the gameplay, a lot of strategy required. And it's cool because it's a what do they call it? Like a token builder game. Like you have a bag and you throw a bunch of tokens into it. And as you go through the game, you collect more and more tokens. You could buy them, you could trade in, you could upgrade. And then your tokens allow you to do different actions. So you can be attacking, you could be building up your ship, getting more weapons, buying items, stuff like that. And what you're doing is you're caught in this kind of time loop where you arrived at a battle and were destroyed, but are able to rewind to the beginning of the battle and try and do it again with stronger weapons and a more understanding of who it is you're fighting. So you get to do that kind of 3 times, strengthen up your ship and defeat enough of the bad guys so that you could attack the mothership. And the damage you do to the mothership stays as you kind of go back into these loops. So it's a cool concept, another time travel type game like Anachrony, and another one-player game. So it's really just designed to be played alone. And what's cool about these one-player games is usually they're pretty quick. They're not like 2-hour games. They're usually, 15, 30-minute games. This one is more about 30 minutes plus, but fun, really interesting, and great art and concepts. And it's designed by Scott Alms, who's also known for all those tiny epic games. So if you're a fan of those as well, Warp's Edge will be right up your alley. Put this one over here. Too many games. Now, Raiders of Scythia. This is a worker placement, resource building, kind of, I guess, I don't know if it's really area control, not so much, but worker placement, resource building game. It's kind of in the world of those like Raiders of the North Sea, or I think it's like the West Kingdoms, those types of games. And I think this is kind of like an alternate version of Raiders of the North Sea that has a lot of updated rules and obviously a completely different design and theme. You play as the Raiders of Scythia, and you're pretty much trying to invade different areas on the board, Greece, Persia, and getting more resources from those areas, scoring more points so that at the end, of course, you get the higher score and you win. I ended up playing it probably for about 2 or 3 days in a row, multiple games every day, because I found it really interesting. And you get to collect horses and eagles And the way you pair your team together, I guess your army, the way you pair your army together, you get different strengths. I really liked how you had to plan out your collection of characters and with the eagles and the horses and how your kind of like team works together to invade. I haven't played a lot of games like this. And so as much as I have done some other work placement games or resource building games, there's something about Raiders that really just kind of like I connected with. And I felt like out of all the games I had played this month, this was one of the ones that really made me want to play it again and again and again. And sadly, I got too many games in August, so I couldn't spend too much time on it if I actually wanted to get through most of these games. But I played this, and then the next day I played Anachrony. And when I was playing Anachrony, I got so frustrated because I kept losing. And it made me want to just kind of set this one up again and play it. So Raiders of Scythia, it's a smaller box compared to a lot of the other games. But really nice artwork. I know the artwork isn't for everybody. I went online and I saw a lot of people seem to be complaining about it, but I find that artwork is really nice. It's a very well-designed game, and I like how all the components kind of work together and how they're supposed to be laid out. And it doesn't require a lot of table space. But it also has a really interesting AI opponent. It really feels like you're playing against a human opponent. So it's a smart AI, and it's challenging. Out of the 4 or 5 games I played, I only managed to win 2 or 3. And so Raiders of Scythia, I would say probably in the top, well, out of how many games did I get? I think I got like 15 or 16 games. In the top 5 of all the games I picked up in August, for sure. Raiders of Scythia. I recently just did an unboxing of the Goonies. Still haven't had a chance to play it. I set it up on my table and my kids came home, and then we didn't have a chance to play it, and I didn't want to leave it there because I had other games to get through too. But the one thing that's really interesting about the Goonies is, as much as it's a cooperative game, there's always going to be one person who plays what's known as the Goondock Master. And the Goondock Master is kind of controlling all of the bad guys and controlling all the bad things that happen to you as you make your way through the caverns. So it's a 2 to 5 player game. There are no solo rules for this, but I am looking into seeing how I could use the components that come with the game to try and figure out if I can automate the Goondock Master and play against it. The way it's set up to play, one person is the GM, the Goondock Master, and all the other players will play the Goonies themselves. If it's just 2 players, then one person is the GM and the other person plays 2 of the Goonies. Going through the rule book and looking at some of the adventures, it looks like a fun little dungeon crawler. And of course, because it's based off of the Goonies, thematically, it's a lot of fun and could be very nostalgic for the people who you're playing with, unless, of course, they don't know what the Goonies are. But my kids and I watched the movie and they really enjoyed it. So I am excited to get this to the table and play it with them. I just still haven't had a chance to do it because they just started school. And so the week has been kind of packed with tons of stuff to do in regards to getting them back to school. But maybe next week when it settles down a bit more. That is the Goonies. Now, I also did an unboxing video of this one, and I have gotten it to the table and I ended up playing it with Abby. And this is Gargoyles Awakening, another one of these kind of like mid-sized box games that came from Target. My buddy Albert was driving up from New York, so he grabbed me Gargoyles, the Goonies, and Alien Fate of the Nostromo. And so Gargoyles, what's cool about this one, of course, is that it's a 3D game board. So you build up these buildings, and your gargoyles, they get to climb to the top and glide down. There's 4 scenarios that come in the base box. Once again, it's a 2 to 5 player game, though it is fully cooperative where you play the gargoyles and you have to fight bad guys or complete some type of mission. So this one might be easier to figure out how to play solo because you could probably just take 2 characters and play it that way. Alien Fate of the Nostromo. I have not had a chance to even open this. I plan on doing a what's in the box. This was the game I was looking most forward to in regards to the 3 that came from Target. And I am a huge fan of horror movies. I'm a huge fan of the Alien franchise. In August, because I ended up getting Alien Fate of the Nostromo, I was very lucky that I also got my hands on Nemesis, which I'll talk about next. Both are kind of outer space adventure games. You know, this is obviously inspired by the movie Alien. Nemesis is more of a ripoff of the movie Aliens. But from what I had read online, this one was kind of known as like the little brother of Nemesis. And I thought it would be cool to pick up as many of these Alien games as possible and down the road do a video to compare them all. So Fate of the Nostromo, Legendary Encounters, Alien, There's also the Alien, It's a Beautiful Day in the Core, and then Nemesis. When I get a chance to play all of them, I will put a video together to discuss kind of like all of the Alien themed games and how they compare to one another and what they play like. So Fate of the Nostromo, not much I can say about it. I do like the look of the minis. I do like the look of the game board, but I still have to do what's in the box to kind of go through all the components in the cards to see exactly what this game entails. Here we have Nemesis. Nemesis was a Kickstarter game. It is known as kind of a riff on the Alien franchise. They recently did another Kickstarter for the sequel called Nemesis Lockdown, but that one hasn't come out just yet. But the original game, Nemesis, you're trapped on a ship. There are aliens popping up all over the place. In this game, they're called intruders. So intruders are coming out of the ductwork, popping up out of the ground, showing up, and pretty much trying to stop you from accomplishing your mission. In the game, you have tons of different missions, things you have to do. If you're playing with other people, you could either be working together or working against each other. Some people might have to destroy the ship. Other people might have to try and get the ship back to Earth. So depending on who accomplishes their mission first, that's who ends up winning the game. And even once you've accomplished your mission, like say if your mission is to kind of like get into an escape pod and get off the ship and make it self-destruct, there's a final moment after you finish the game where if you've gotten some of these infection cards, you kind of put them into this reader where it's like it's all red, you can't see what it is, and you may actually be infected. And if you're infected at the end of the game, you actually lose. So it's got some really cool mechanics, great storyline, amazing minis, very nice art. And I managed to get the Kickstarter all-in pledge. So it came with the core box, there's the Carnomorphs expansion, the Void Seeders, and Aftermath. So there's tons of gameplay that came with this. And this is one of the games that's been on my wish list for a while. And like Solomon Kane, which I managed to get last month, this was kind of like my big splurge for the month. So on top of everything else I ended up getting in August, I'm very excited to play more of it. I only managed to play a couple missions just because, like I said, there's too many games that came into my life this month. But my buddy also got it at the exact same time. So he's learning how to play it. I'm learning how to play it. And then we're going to get together and be able to just kind of sit down with it. Maybe I'm going to bring one of the expansions so we could experience it together. And that is Nemesis. I'll put it here because things are starting to pile up on both sides now. Here we got Maximum Apocalypse. So this game is a couple years old, pretty much a straightforward card-based game where you have map tiles, different characters, and each character gets, depending on which character you choose, they all have different powers, different sets of cards, so action cards for the character. And it's a post-apocalyptic world. And what's really cool about this is that in the core set, you could fight zombies, you could fight aliens, you could fight robots. There's all kinds of different enemies you can encounter and different scenarios. And then you could also swap the enemies in and out. So there's a lot of replayability, a lot of options when it comes to this game. And there's actually quite a few expansions. You could add kaijus, you could add giant bugs, there's tons of different little mini expansions. There's also a large expansion that's called Gothic Horrors, I believe. But I wanted to get my hands on the game and see how it played because I'd read a lot about it. And I really like these kind of like map tile games where you're flipping the tiles, kind of like similar to Subterra. The tiles look a lot like the ones from Subterra, but this one has kind of like a storyline going along with it too, and multiple different scenarios you could be playing. I like the idea of having the different characters. This is a game where you have to kind of play two-handed. So you get to choose two characters, and obviously two characters, all the different characters that you compare together can create a very different experience for the gameplay. And it's something very straightforward. Like it's just tiles and cards. And I find those types of games are really interesting. You know, these kind of smaller box games that pack in a lot of gameplay and a lot of theme as well, I find really cool. The artwork is great. The game takes up a bit of space on your table, but only because you got to have all those map tiles out. And there's quite a few sets of cards that kind of go around it. But I've only played one or two games so far, but I found it really interesting and I'm excited to get it back to the table. But that's Maximum Apocalypse. Now, this is MicroMacro Crime City. This is a game I picked up because I wanted to play it with my kids. I've read about it because it had won a bunch of awards, and it's a pretty innovative game within the mechanics that it sets up, because from the box, you can tell exactly what the game is itself. The box actually has a crime that has been committed on it that you kind of have to solve. You could even play this game before buying it by just spending some time with the box. And so what it is there's a crime that's been committed, and you have to look over the map to try and figure out the clues of who committed the crime. The crime that you could solve that's actually on the box is who murdered the burger vendor. And so as you look through the box, you can see all the different characters. You got to find where the burger vendor is, see if anybody around him looks suspicious. And every section of the board is happening at the same time. So you'll see a character over here, and he's also over here, and he's also over here. And he's doing different things in these areas. So you actually have to kind of try and draw the line of what happened and maybe who committed the act and where they were and what led them to kind of committing the murder or committing the crime. So it's a really innovative game. And so far, I haven't had a chance to play it, but Abby and I sat down and just kind of tried to solve the crime that was on the box. And so out of all the games I have here, the only ones I haven't played yet are Alien, Goonies, MicroMacro, Crime City, and I think that's it. I actually had a pretty good month. I've just been going through even like games from last month that I haven't played. I've been setting up this month and trying to get through them. And right now, I think I only have maybe 3 or 4 games out of my whole collection that I haven't had a chance to play yet. But MicroMacro is one of them as well. So the next 2 games are also designed by David Turksey. And so he's the guy who did Anachrony. When it comes to board games and solo play, the name David Turksey is synonymous with designing these great solo opponents. So in Anachrony, you had the Chronobot and the Chronosis. And in Excavation Earth, you have the Zoo. So Excavation Earth is about a planet that's been destroyed, and aliens have come to try and like explore and dig up artifacts that they can then sell in the space marketplace. It's a really cool concept, some amazing artwork. And it's the first game I've ever played that is a market-based game. So you're actually collecting these artifacts, and you have to see if there's enough interest in the specific artifacts you've collected to sell them for the highest price. And then, of course, the money you make is your points. So by the end of the game, whoever has the most amount of money, the most amount of credits, wins. And so the Zoo are actual clones. And thematically, and I guess the story behind all of the characters in this game is really deep and interesting, and it's not really needed. So that's what's really cool about a lot of the stuff that David Turksey designs, or the games that he's a part of the design team, because they usually have a lot of heavy themes in them, but also these like great mechanics that allow the solo opponent to feel very much like you're interacting with a real person. So you're not playing against a bot that's going to constantly do the same actions. The choices that the AI makes is very random, and sometimes also plays off of the choices you have made. So Excavation Earth is really interesting. It was also a Kickstarter game, and just recently they're kickstarting, I think it just ended possibly a few days ago, they kickstarted a new expansion. I think it's called In a Museum. And so if you are interested in Excavation Earth and interested in getting the Kickstarter edition, it may be late pledging in the next few days, and you can still get your hands on the Kickstarter version if that's what you're interested in. But this is the retail version that has been released, and that's Excavation Earth. Now, Tekhenu, this is another David Turksey game, thematically very different. This is known as Tekhenu, Obelisk of the Sun. This is a worker placement, resource building, in a way, area control, also a dice management game, which is very interesting. And you lay out the board, and there's this giant obelisk in the middle, and how the sun hits the obelisk determines on which dice are considered pure, tainted, or forbidden. And then each area of the board is devoted to a different god, and when you perform a god action, you can do different things. You could place buildings, you could build statues. And so the gameplay is all about kind of like controlling more of the board, building up your resources, performing these god actions to increase your points, pretty much. And same way as the other games designed by David Turksey, the solo opponent is really challenging and plays very much like a real player. So it is a cool game. In the past, I did pick up more narrative-based games, adventure games, stuff like that. But this month, I seem to have collected a lot of these kind of worker placement, resource building, area management type games, because I find these are more strategy games. The other ones are more like exploration, adventure games. And so I think I'm like upping the ante in regards to the types of games I find challenging now, because the adventure games, they're, as much as they all can play differently, they all are similar in a way, because you're just exploring, and whether you're doing a choose your own adventure in a storybook and going along, or discovering things on the actual map itself, they're all very similar. And in a way, a lot of these types of games are similar as well. They're just thematically different, whether it's time travel, ancient Egypt, outer space, stuff like that. But I find these types of games are popping up in my collection more lately, just because it seems like I'm wanting to challenge myself more to figure out how, I guess, these more complex games play. And so Tekhenu, Anachrony, Excavation Earth, all by David Turksey, all very different, but all very interesting and challenging in their own way. If you're looking for a great multiplayer game that has a brilliant AI opponent, then you can't go wrong with any of these games, or pretty much any game designed by David Turksey. So that is Tekhenu. I guess we're at the last game. Here we have Tidal Blades, Heroes of the Reef, Part 1. Now, I would have to assume that a part 2 is coming out. From what I've read, this is also a Kickstarter game, so there's a lot of information about it online. This is the retail version, so it doesn't come with a lot of the extra bells and whistles. There's also an expansion that I didn't get. But from what I've read, part 1 is the characters training and preparing for the adventure that will be in part 2. Supposedly very different games, very different game mechanics, but thematically in the same world, based in the same type of, I would have to assume, design and artwork and stuff like that. Tidal Blades is kind of a character building game where you're trying to strengthen your characters by going around the board to these different kind of areas where you have different challenges, getting stronger in case monsters appear. But it's really more of like, it feels like it's a friendly competition where it's like you've showed up at the Olympics, but the end goal is to be strong enough to fight these monsters that are invading your world. There's a kind of like a bit of asymmetry to the different characters you have and their action cards and how each of them interact with the different areas they hit on the board. There's also a judge that moves around from the different arenas. So if you happen to be performing a challenge at the arena while the judge is there, you could get more points. And so it's really all about building up your character so that you can be strong enough to defeat the monsters and make it through all the rounds. I actually think this one thematically probably has the most going on in all the games. It's a very unique theme, beautiful artwork, and a very interesting board. When you lay, it's not really a board as much, it's like board components. So like there's a lot of different pieces that kind of go out on the table. And it's just a really nice looking game. And I know with the Kickstarter edition, there was a lot of extra things. There was like a dice tray that was like designed to look like one of the arenas. And even just in the retail version, there's a lot. And I actually was surprised that the actual, like the retail price for this game is pretty cheap. It's under $50, but there's a lot of stuff in here, a lot of components, a lot of cards, and a lot of great design. So this is a very unique game too. Very similar to some of the other games I have, thematically very unique, but also I've never seen a game that kind of looks like this or plays like this. So as much as some of these games, like role-playing games where you're building up your character and you're trying to increase your stats to get stronger, this is just that. There's no other part to it. So it really is just getting, your character to a point where they are the strongest out of everybody. Now, of course, if you're playing it solo, you're just playing against an AI opponent. And what's cool is when you play solo, you actually get to kind of be co-op with some of the other characters. They kind of help you out as you play against the AI. So this game is kind of like that RPG setup level of any of those old games you've played, where you're just like strengthening your character, getting ready for your adventure. And it's kind of cool because it is really just about building up the points. So like the other strategy games I've been talking about, where you're just kind of going against the AI opponent, building up points, and whoever has the highest points at the end wins. That's what this game is. But what's interesting is that because there's going to be a part 2 where it will be the more adventure and narrative type game that connects with this one, I find that really interesting, that they are going to create multiple games in the same universe, but different types of games. Very cool concept. Interested to see where this is going to go. I haven't read anything or heard anything yet about part 2. But for now, with Tidal Blades Heroes of the Reef, very cool game, very interesting. And to tell you the truth, probably my most diverse month for games, because there are just so many different types of games here. Some actual one-player games, some games aimed more towards kids, and then some more complex games, sci-fi, a couple alien games in there, post-apocalyptic games. If I take a look at all the games I picked up in August and I have to pick like the top ones, I would probably say Raiders of Scythia is probably number 1. Like, I didn't know what to expect. I actually bought it because it was kind of like, if I bought more games off of this one guy, I would have gotten something for free kind of thing. And so it was the most interesting out of the other games he had. And it was quite cheap. And even retail, it goes for quite cheap. So out of all of the games, I would say my number 1 pick is Raiders of Scythia. And, there'd probably be a tie between all the David Turksey games. So Excavation Earth, I find the most interesting and unique. But Tekhenu and Anachrony are also both up there. I would probably say Anachrony, even though I hated it for a while, it would probably be Excavation Earth, Anachrony, and then Tekhenu in regards to those 3 games. And everything else I quite enjoyed. And I know there's a lot more going on with Nemesis because I just scraped the surface of everything that's in that game. And so I'd like to get back to it too. But my top picks, let's say Raiders of Scythia and Excavation Earth were my 2 top picks for this month. It's a lot of games, a lot of playtime this month, and I'm still catching up with games I hadn't played last month. So every day or every other day, I've been setting up a new game upstairs to kind of learn the new rules, go through them and see exactly what I'm going to keep. There's actually been a few more games too that I played this month that I've decided I'm going to kind of pass on and play it forward. Like I'm pass them on to someone that hopefully will enjoy them more. But out of all of this haul, I would probably say I'm probably going to keep all of them. Like I've enjoyed them all so much and they're all so different. Yeah, so one thing I'm realizing is, I don't really want to have a lot of games in my collection that are too similar, whether it's thematically or, like mechanically, just because if I have to choose between 2 games to get to the table, I'd much rather just have the one that I like the most. And then instead of just being like, oh, I guess I should play this other one too, so that I can just get it to the table because. So I'm going to start to be a bit more strict with the games that I keep. And I think, I ended up getting rid of Oath and Root last month. And now this month, there's a few games too that I'm going to put onto my sell shelf, let's say. And I'll talk about those more in a different video. But for now, these are all the games that came into my collection in August. And there are a lot of titles to go through, so thanks for sticking around. If you have any questions on any of these games or anything else, please leave it in the comments below. And for now, I'm just going to say goodbye, and I'll see you next time. Take it easy.